Good morning. Welcome to the Shepherd Station. We are at the Stockyard in Headland at 24 East Church Street in Headland, Alabama. Stop it, Andy.
Keep rolling.
We're going to keep rolling this time. I always mess up the intro, so you guys know that. It's just a normal day for us. Got Thomas with me here. I got Andy with me here. We're at the Stockyard. I think I've already said that. Come by and see us. We got great food, great sandwiches, great coffee. Come hang out with us. Today in the studio, we have Reuben Poole, former Dothan firefighter.
Current.
I'm sorry, current Dothan fire. What's your rank right now?
He's
Captain.
Captain. That's right. Captain. I remember that now. A lot of stories from this man. Again, Andy's got this guy coming on here. So, Andy, take it away.
Thanks, Eric. We're glad to have Reuben on this morning. And me and Reuben, we communicate some on Facebook and some other social media platforms. And I follow a lot of stuff that Reuben does. And I thought that Reuben would be a great guest for us today because he's a first responder. He's a leader. He's a man of faith and just got a lot of different things that we want to talk to Reuben about. He's had a really outstanding career. Guy joined the Coast Guard, went to boot camp between his junior and senior year in high school, became a rescue swimmer, later as a paramedic and worked as a paramedic in New Orleans, correct? And yeah.
Bet that was fun.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be an eye-opening experience there. We'll talk about maybe a couple of calls that you had in New Orleans that might stand out, if there anything that could stand out from New Orleans. But Reuben's been with the Dothan Fire Department now since, 1994? 94? And we just wanted to bring him in today, and we're going to talk about several things. But I think it's going to be a great episode, and I think everybody's going to enjoy it. And we welcome you in this morning, Reuben.
Thank you.
1994, man. You getting ready? You about to close the book on that, aren't you?
Yeah, maybe a few more. Maybe get to where I can draw. So get both coming in at the same time.
What about your? You grew up in Dothan, right? You're born and raised in Dothan.
Yes.
He's a hometown boy.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your childhood and your raising here in Southeast Alabama.
My childhood really wasn't anything different than most. Just grew up and tried to see how close we could get to trouble without actually getting in trouble. And I
remember.
Was raised in faith and went with my dad and stepmother primarily to Trinity Lutheran Church. Went through confirmation there. So learned a lot through that. Had a great pastor in Pastor Rogers.
It's a pretty church.
It is. It is. Of course, when I went through there, that was back when it was on corner of Park and Selma.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, they're out on Cottonwood Highway now, outside. Was in my junior year of high school and had a buddy of mine that found out he could go to Army boot camp. Like, well, let me check on this. From growing up fishing with my dad a lot, we'd go down and fish on the jetties out of Panama City. So a lot of times down there to watch the Coast Guard boats come through, and I thought, man, that's pretty cool, and watching them go out. And been a little bit naive about what was going on in the world at the time. I thought, well, we're not at war. Everybody else is sitting around just training. These guys are getting out doing something. So that's why I chose the Coast Guard. And went the summer between my junior and senior year. Most of the guys in my boot camp class were college age, and it was a program basically set up for college, but I made the age cutoff.
You go to Yorktown or New Jersey?
Went to New Jersey. Went Cape May, New Jersey. Beautiful little town until you get through that gate, and then it changes really quick. But it was interesting. It was a lot tougher than what most people would think Coast Guard boot camp would be. And I actually had one of the instructors there tell us one day, he said, the reason we are so tough on you is that if you're doing a boarding and you've got some drug runner cussing you out, you don't get mad and shoot them. Yeah. That, we want to put you through that right now so you don't have to deal with it later. That kind of stuck with about why training is the way it is.
Right. The Coast Guard, I don't think I've related this to you before, but, my dad, he had previously been in the Army, and then he went into the Coast Guard Reserve sometime in the late 70s and stayed in there through the mid-80s, I know. And he and several other law enforcement officers and some firefighters from Dothan pretty much made up the reserve unit, and a couple of FHP guys I remember too, but made up the reserve unit in Panama City, the port security and the SAR unit down there. And I know you said that you were stationed on the Point Lobos down there, 82-foot patrol boat. It was down there. That boat, I remember it, and the USS Dependable, which was, I think, was a 210-foot cutter, was down there. And then they had a bunch of 40 and 41, I think 41-foot patrol boats down there and all. But my dad, he had thoroughly enjoyed the Coast Guard. He loved it. Of course, it went along with the law enforcement mission that he was already doing and all. But
so when I was in reserves, I was at the small boat station, and or the reserve unit, and I found out some little tricks really quick. That I'm one. For those that don't know me, and those that do know me will appreciate this. I don't care to stand dress inspection. I don't care to put on a Class A uniform.
Right.
Yeah, me either. But I learned if I got down there early and I went over into the small boat station, the watch stander would ask me to stand radio watch while they did their morning cleanups. Anything happened, call for them, yell out. So, and they would cover me as far as the reserve unit went. So they'd call over and say, "Hey, we got pools down here already."
Yeah.
So I'd get to miss out on the dress inspections that morning. And, and make friends with guys, on the full-time guys.
The method behind his madness.
Yeah.
Then after I graduated and I went full-time, that's when I was put on the Point Lobos.
I think the Coast Guard, and I'll just say this for any of the younger crowd that's out there listening, I think the Coast Guard, whether active or reserve, would be a really good career choice, or go in and do some active duty time like you did, and then come back and stay in reserve, and you've got another retirement also.
Exactly.
What made you want to join the Coast Guard? Like, what was it? What was your driving force?
At the time, believe it or not, even though I kind of went the other direction once I got in, it was to get law enforcement experience and hopefully go into a federal branch of law enforcement. But after I got in, I kind of got bit by the search and rescue bug, so kind of went the rescue direction.
You chose to take the easy route and go firefighter.
Yeah,
That's it.
I'm kidding, firefighters. I'm joking. I am joking. I give you guys a hard time, but I love
friendly
every one of you.
rivalry. That's all.
It is. That's all it is.
We love them. But after you got in and you doing port security or search and rescue to start with?
Search and rescue.
Search and rescue.
Yeah, we'd go out and we'd do some law enforcement patrol and all, but. And while I was on the Point Lobos, we and kind of get back to some stuff before this in a little bit, but my biggest bust on there was a 15 ton, 30,312 pounds marijuana.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this real quick.
That's what
Take me through
That was in the 80s.
Late 80s.
Yeah.
Take me through a typical encounter with you running into a drug trafficker or anything like that. Take me through a boarding process.
Back then, it wasn't like you would think. It wasn't very Miami Vice-ish.
Right.
Of course, we were all armed. We'd have most of the people with a long gun. One person with the 870 with the 12 gauge and all. They'd watch the crew on the stern, but we'd see a boat either on radar or out on the horizon somewhere and think, let's try this one. Or we'd get an epic report, the El Paso Intelligence Center report, and, names would match up. Right. This particular boat, I won't ever forget it. It was, when we pulled up, the crew was super friendly with us. 4 Costa Ricans, 1 Cuban national. The Cuban national was the only one that spoke English. So they helped us crawl up on the boat. And before we got to it, you could smell it. You could smell it.
And they probably
it
knew
was strong. They knew. And back then, all that happened is would get them, arrest them, take them in, turn them over. They get sent back. Right.
Yeah.
And all there were stories. I didn't never get to see it, but there were stories of some of the boarding officers crawl over and they know the guy by first name.
Yeah.
They probably
So
were.
somebody else would look, say, you know him? So, yeah, I've already arrested him 3 times.
They knew the process just like everybody else, and they probably worried more about what's going to happen to them on the other side,
Right.
for losing their narcotics.
How far off the coast was this vessel? You
This
didn't
was down
board it.
close to Yucatan.
Yeah. You didn't. Of course, you didn't board it because it was a U.S. flag vessel. Which
Right.
Coast Guard can board a U.S. flag vessel anywhere in the world.
Exactly.
But what about other authority? You got to be within the 200-mile range, or
Yeah, there's different lines and limits.
Yeah.
But this one we're pretty far out in the Gulf. But it's only we went on board, and when we went down below, you could actually see daylight shining through the hull.
Right.
I mean, it was not a very seaworthy vessel to begin with.
Wow.
So from previous encounter, I actually had met the rear admiral that was over the New Orleans district, the 8th district, which covered Panama City and covered us. And when we were pulling the boat in, I rode in on the drug boat. So as soon as I got off,
So you rode in on the unworthy sea vessel.
on the unworthy sea vessel, thank God it was. Thank goodness it was being towed by a Coast Guard cutter. But and I knew the guys on there. I pretty well trusted them. But so when we got in, there was all the press was there. All the media and Florida Marine Patrol escorted us in. And when I stepped off, some of the guys from the small boat station, first thing I had to go on, they had to search me and the other guy that was on the boat.
Yeah.
So I threw up my hands and they patted me down. I just heard somebody yell, "Hey, pull!" And I spun around real quick and so oh yes sir, it was the admiral. He said, "I thought they had you for a minute." And I laughed. They don't know where to look. But the other funny thing on that boat is, as big as a unseaworthy vessel as it was, they had the most beautiful sextant that the old handheld navigation by the stars.
Oh, wow.
This beautiful teak wood box, and I was like,
Love to
15
have
tons
this.
of marijuana there, and that's a lot more tempting if I was going to take anything off the boat. That is a beautiful antique right there. But there wasn't really a whole lot of shootouts or stuff like that. There was some, there were times that some other guys, but I never saw it.
So what made you want to jump off on the law enforcement side over to the rescue swimmer side?
The 82-foot cutter, and if any old coasties watch this will tell you, they were built in the early to mid 60s. They were not designed to be out on the Gulf or out in the ocean. They were made to run the rivers in Vietnam.
Right.
So mast was 35 feet out of the water. The bottom of the rudder, it was 6-foot draft.
Yeah.
So we used to laugh about, a duck would swim by and the boat would start rocking back and forth.
Yeah.
For the longest time on there were 10 of us in the crew, and I was one of 2 that did not get seasick. And I was up on the bridge for 12, 14 hours standing watch because
You got 10 guys on
everybody
a
else.
boat, and these guys get seasick.
On this one, yes. I mean, it was a rarity. People didn't get seasick on an 82, and the seas were never too rough. Born 82, supposedly there's the old unofficial motto of the Coast Guard: you have to go out, but you don't have to come back. But one night we were in Texas and anchored out in Galveston Bay, and it was these nice, slow, rocky to sleep 2-foot rollers coming through. And I was up on watch and went down below to wake up my relief. And when I came back, went up to the bridge, my chin was about even with the bridge deck. And I looked up at the bosun mate up there and I said, "If you need me, I'll be hanging over the rail." And he looked at me because he was shot. He knew I didn't get sick. He said, "What?" And I said, "If you need me, I'll be hanging over the rail. I got to go now." So after that, it would hit at night, side to side seas. It's the only time I'd get it. But early one morning, sunrise, we were out doing a search, and a Coast Guard Falcon jet flew over, and a helicopter flew over, and I looked up and I said, "You know what? Those guys aren't getting sick a bit up there."
I'd rather be air sick than seasick.
It's like those guys aren't they're not rocking and rolling like we are down here and all. But no, it was, I wanted to be the best.
Yeah.
I wanted to be elite.
So you wanted to get out and fight one of God's most powerful forces, the ocean, all by yourself.
And it is, that's one of the things you learn, that once you go out that door, you're solo. Mm-hmm. Until you're back in that hoist and coming back up, you are solo. But I applied for rescue swimmer school, and things got shut down for a while. It was under the trickle-down economy. The Coast Guard was still under Department of Transportation at the time. There was no such thing as Homeland Security.
Mm-hmm.
So things got kicked back off. I still had about a 3-year wait. I'd gone over to the small boat station, transferred over there in the meantime, and teletype kicked off one day, and somebody pulled it off and looked and said, "You got orders for rescue swimmer school." And I was like, "Okay." yeah, whatever. You're paying me back for that joke I pulled last week. And they're like, no, you got orders. And I was like, okay, who do you know that printed this up? And sure enough, and it was like 3 weeks away. And I was like, yeah, I was looking at months or years. Definitely not prepared, you know? So it was, you know, right then, start running, swimming, and all trying to catch up.
Had you already been doing any of that prior to?
Not much.
Okay.
And I was in my young 20s, single, and living in Panama City Beach.
Gotcha. Enough said.
But yeah, it was, instead of hanging out on the beach, it was getting out in the water and swimming to the second sandbar and back. And so rescue swimmer at the time actually had an 80% attrition rate.
I was going to ask what the attrition rate
Yeah,
for that was, because from my understanding, it's pretty high.
Yeah, it was
Well,
80%.
most people are terrified of the water. If their feet can't touch the bottom of the pool, they're terrified of water.
Or if they can't see the bottom.
And of course, panic is the cause of most drownings.
The worst.
You know?
Well, see,
is.
I got to work with a couple of guys that were Navy rescue swimmers, and doing one of the things I got to do with the Army. We were in the water all the time, and look, I lifted, was always really strong, you know, this and that. It doesn't matter how big you are, how tough you are, how strong you are. When you get in that water, we always said the water is a great equalizer.
Oh, it is, definitely. And yeah, the panic is what gets people.
Yeah.
And it's what gets the rescuer is the victim panicking and grabbing on. And if you don't know how to deal with that, you get in trouble really quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, they took 6 of us per class. That was it.
There was only 6 per class.
6 per class.
How many people would usually try to get in? How many people do they have?
I don't know how many were on the waiting list at the time.
Hold on. Let me back up. Hold on. You would only take 6 per class, not
class.
graduate 6 per class. You would take 6 per class.
Take 6 per class. Now,
That's
we
very
did
small.
graduate 6, but it was not the original 6. I was 3 of the original.
Wow.
One was our class leader, and we were doing a 1 mile buddy tow in the pool. And he was up ahead of me, just under half a pool length at one point, and got to the shallow end. And he released his victim and kicked off his fins and got out of the pool and never saw him again. He just walked away. Just walked away.
just said,
and
"No,
that was
this is
it. And you know, he said, "I'm done
What
with
phase?
it."
How far into that were y'all?
Pretty good, pretty far in. Probably over halfway through the Elizabeth
mind
City
beat him.
part. Yeah,
Yeah.
his mind got him, and he was actually a petty officer. He was aviation, maybe structural mechanic, and was stationed in Miami and saw rescue swimmers getting to run and work out and do all the fun stuff every day. And he decided he wanted to do that until he got to the class, and never saw him again after that.
So you didn't get an understanding of why.
Nope, he just decided it wasn't for him, and he was gone. They named a new class leader, and we kept going.
That's crazy.
We had some guys that got rolled back into a class behind us, and then had some guys from earlier classes that got rolled into ours. So we still graduated 6, but 3 of us were the original. Pretty much everything I finished in that class, I was 6th on the physical part. You know, I was the one dogging. We had a really, really interesting instructor. And when you get a chance, look this guy up. His name was, at the time, Petty Officer Joe Rodriguez. And Joe Rod was the one that would train us like we were SEALs. We had a river that came through the base. He would take us to the beach. We'd make sugar cookies and sand angels and carry the pole, and he'd run us and all that fun stuff. But he and Petty Officer Flythe, and I'll tell some stories on Petty Officer Flythe in a minute that are pretty funny. But Joe Rod, he was an awesome guy, awesome instructor. And as I was saying, I was finishing 5th or 6th pretty much in everything on the physical aspect. And he was talking to some other instructors one day, and they finally let us out of the pool. And it's usually 5 or 6 attempts getting out of the pool before they let you out, because you have to do it all the same way, the same time, mounting out. And excuse me. We were walking by, and he looked over, and I won't use the same language he did on here, of course, but he looked over and he kind of pointed at me, and I was like, I'm ignoring it. I was still waiting to hear what he said. Kind of walked by, and he just kind of pointed over and looked at the other instructor. He said, "That man right there has got moxie." And later he told me, he brought it real close to graduation. He said, you're the one that has what it takes. He said, we get a lot of guys in here that are physical specimens. He said that they've never had a physical challenge in their life. They've played football growing up and baseball, and they were athletic, and they've never had the challenges that we have here. He said, we test you like this, so if you have an issue, it happens here. Right. It doesn't happen out there in the water. He said, I can tell by your mentality, you're not going to quit when you're in the water. And that was probably one of the greatest compliments I have. Now, we had a petty officer at the small boat station after I got orders that he said one thing that really got me through the whole class. And he was talking with our XO, which at the small boat station was the E6. And they were talking, and Petty Officer Knight looked over and said, yeah, so Poole got orders to rescue swimmer school with ASM school. And Petty Officer Duffy looked back and said, yeah, but what are we going to do with them when they send them back?
That's motivation there.
I promise you, I have used that line throughout my life, but I used it through that school.
Yeah,
but when I was ready to quit, when I was ready to drop and do everything, all I could do was picture his face and him saying, looking at me and smiling and saying, what are we going to do when they send him back? And I said, I'm not giving him the satisfaction.
How long is rescue swimmer school?
It's 16 weeks.
How many times in that 16 weeks did you question whether or not you were going to make it, or look at it and go, I'm done?
Oh, daily.
And what kept driving you beside it? Was it that guy that kept driving you?
A lot of it was that class camaraderie, different things like that. I was horrible at running. Always have been, always will be, even though I took that up as a hobby. But you've heard of the runner's high. Yeah. I got it one time, the true runner. Yeah. And we were running as a class, and it hit, and I started going by the class
go forever
and kept going.
Hits. Yeah.
And Petty Officer Rodriguez was running us that day. So when we got back, we went back to the grinder, and we did another added on workout. And he told me, he said, that's to show you don't ever spend everything you've got. Yeah. Let's keep some in the tank just in case. And, but Petty Officer Rodriguez went on. He went back to officer candidate school, became Mustang, worked up to, I believe, commander. He developed basically Coast Guard anti-terrorism response. He actually went and trained and worked with DEA teams down in South America and Colombia, got in one of the longest sustained firefights ever in law enforcement.
Wow.
He's an incredible guy. I forgot exactly how it happened, but he went and trained with the Marines and wound up in charge of a U.S. Marine unit as a Coast Guard officer.
Wow.
And just phenomenal purpose.
Wow.
Phenomenal person. He, I think it was pancreatic cancer that finally took him out. But if you Google Petty Officer Joe Rodriguez or Commander Joe Rodriguez or Joe Rodriguez Coast Guard, it's really worth the read.
He's one of those. I want to make sure I get the name right. I don't have anything with me. I'm not
So 16 weeks. That's a lot of swimming.
I say a lot of swimming.
Most of the day, every day.
Up in Elizabeth City, it was mainly 1 to 2 days a week. You were working out on the grinder in the mornings, then you do. So the actual rating for rescue swimmer in the Coast Guard at the time was aviation survivalman. Now it's aviation survival tech. I guess politically correct. Now, I'm not sure that's what it is, but it changed. So as that rating, you take care of all the survival equipment on the helicopter, from the float bags that are attached to it, the fire suppression system in the engine, on the fixed wing aircraft, the parachutes for the drop pumps, the pumps themselves, anything that's got to do with rescue or survival, you take care of that. So a lot of your days were spent doing that. Another thing about, and there's pros and cons to this in my opinion, every written test you took, it was answered in essay form, and it had to be verbatim, word for word. And it was training on perfection. But at the same time, my mentality on that is you are not as learning as much as you are memorizing. Right. So if you're memorizing word for word to get through that next test.
Yeah.
And there's a difference in memorization versus actually knowing what
learning.
Oh,
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. If I can look at 4 and pick one, I pretty well know what's going on. The memorization, I know it now.
Right.
Am I going to know it 3 days from now, a week from now?
Right.
So,
Well, one thing that I'm hearing
definitely
from you is that, and being the organization that they are, it sounds like the Coast Guard has a very, very high standard.
Oh,
I've
definitely.
always been told.
Definitely. Like I said, boot camp, they weed you out. It's not, he's on the line, he's good enough.
Yeah.
And the same with rescue swimmer school, the aviation surviving school.
Is the rescue swimmer school or maybe Coast Guard? There's this viral video going around right now of one of their things they do. You might know what I'm talking about. It's like they lay on their back with a mask on, and they put water in the mask. Mm-hmm. Is that Coast Guard?
It is, and I'll tell you something.
Did you do that?
On that? They do that, but so when you jump from a helicopter, the mask is not on your face; it's up on your head.
You have to learn how to clear it.
When you hit the water and go under, you pull your mask down, push on the top, and it breaks the seal on the bottom. You exhale really hard, and it blows that water out. So on my final test, when we had to go through the Navy Rescue Swimmer School, after we graduate, back up a second, after we get through in North Carolina, we get sent to Pensacola, and we go through the 3-week Navy Rescue Swimmer School there. That final test, they take you into the pool one at a time. So you're sitting all geared up in the locker room, and they come up and grab a guy, and they come grab another one a little while later, and they grab well, let's see if a coastie can pass, and make you think everybody's failing this. So the instructors are in the pool, and it's basically, we laugh, it's like doing a rescue in that school is similar to if a plane full of people from a insane asylum crashed and you have to jump in. I mean, these guys are acting like it's all the instructors, but they're freaking out. They're grabbing you, jumping on your head. So anyway, I jumped off the platform, did my jump, hit the water, thought I had cleared my mask and came up and still had some water in it. So I grabbed it real quick to tilt it. And one of the instructors saw that, and he was like, "Oh, you don't want that mask, huh?" And he took it and flung it across the pool. And so I had to finish my evolution
without your mask,
without my mask.
Wow. I will tell you,
it was water spraying in the face, and
it is tough when you're doing and nothing like that. But the stuff that we did out there when you're fighting somebody in the water, because you'd fight these flight school students in the water, and these are straight. Some of them are what we called street to seat or high school to flight school. They have had no inoculation to stress or panic or anything, and they go under the water, and it's nuts. You know that.
Oh, it is.
And when you lose your mask, now it's no visibility, and you're still having to get this guy out of the water, and it just gets crazy. So your mask is very important.
What's the worst thing? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say the only other thing was, when you're training, there may be 2 or 3 instructors, and you'll have one in what we call a cross chest carry. So you're basically behind them. You've got their back against your chest, and you're reached across, and you've got a good grip. Then you'll tote them for a little while, and then they'll give you a pinch on the arm. That's a sign, hey, you're clear. You can release. What they're waiting on is for you to slowly just kind of drift off and start relaxing a little bit, and then they spin and jump and grab, and then it's on, and you're taking them underwater and trying to work through and all, and it's that keeping that mentality of keep this grip, keep this guy locked down the whole time, no matter how much they relax until you feel that pinch.
Right.
But
wow, that's interesting. What's the worst thing that you had to do, like that they put you through in boot camp or whatever it is that you had to go through?
Probably 1 mile buddy tow, because it's so mundane. And the first one you do is in a pool, and
that's for the worst one because it's back.
Because it's back and forth. It's mundane. You're looking at that dark stripe on the bottom of the pool, just back and forth and back. And if you don't have the mentality, if you don't have a good imagination, where you can just put yourself somewhere else mentally, and keep this guy in check in tow. And when you're doing that, it's another student that they're not going to flip on you then.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But that, maybe some of the finals. Where
so it's all
got
like a mental thing, really. That was the hardest part.
It really is. I mean, it's physically tough, and that concrete grinder that you're on, you're sitting out there doing sit-ups, and we'd wear the UDT shorts, like the Navy SEAL shorts, and you'd start seeing right at the base of somebody's spine, we'd call them strawberries, but it was a little cherry pop up of blood, from sitting there and chafing on that, and the physical, and the SAR babies, the search and rescue babies. They're black, real thick, condensed. It's like a brick, but they're rubber and they're hard.
Yep.
They'd put us in a real tight circle, and we'd start passing one. You had to tread water. That wasn't that bad, but they'd throw a second one in.
Yeah.
You'd have to go down, somebody'd go down and get it and bring it up, and you have to pass it in opposite directions. And you're treading water, and the worst thing is when you got them both at the same time. And it was take a breath, go under, pass, hope your buddy's grabbing them quick, and so you could get back up, and just the mundane.
Did they ever give you the challenge or the challenge where you had the 5-gallon water jugs, and you would have to
I think so.
take that jug in the water with you, and while treading water, empty that jug out?
I don't think we had that one. That would be interesting.
That one was tough.
I bet.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, yeah.
What are some of the most important things you learned from all of that? Like what were some of the most important takeaways?
Self-reliance and not giving up, whatever that stuck in your mind, whatever that mantra was that stuck in your mind, that you didn't give up, and that, that helicopter's there, but you've got to make it back to that helicopter, to that hoist. And
You're the only one in the water.
You're the only one in the water other than the victim.
So you got two pilots, you got a crew chief
Yeah,
and a
flight
rescue
med,
swimmer.
right. And once you go out that door, it's you until you're back on that hoist.
You'd only have one rescue swimmer on the bird?
Exactly. Especially on the H-65s. Like I said, the Dolphins are smaller, they're weight critical.
Right.
We'd have to do, if they called for rescue swimmer, us and our equipment, flight med, 2 pilots, full of fuel, we'd have to do roll and take off like a fixed wing aircraft. And it really wasn't a big deal unless you were stationed somewhere like I was in New Orleans, where you'd go out and fly and you'd land on an oil rig and refuel, and you didn't have that long runway.
Right.
And I'm sure y'all know what auto rotation is.
I've done it. I've been on it
We would
several times.
we'd fuel up, and I love landing on the oil rigs because I found another little trick is, just tell them on the fuel and say, hey, I'm going to go hit the head real quick and go use the bathroom. And you find the galley, and nobody eats better than an oil rig worker, and they never eat leftovers. So if you went down and you saw the chef and the cook and said, hey, where's the bathroom? And he'd see me in a red wetsuit. He'd know he's here. One of our guys fell off, and we're looking for him. So, like, it's over here. You want a steak real quick, or you want some cookies, or like, give me a handful. I'd come up, and at the time I had a mustache, so the pilot said, that cookie crumbs in your mouth? Like, yeah, you want a cookie? But we get ready to take off the oil rig. We don't have a long runway, and it couldn't hold a hover, so they hovered off of the landing pad on the oil rig, and we'd drop and start dropping towards the water and build up airspeed, and then they'd pull it out. And that never got comfortable. That never ever got comfortable.
I was going to say, did you ever get used to that?
No, not at all.
I could not
Not
imagine.
doing the autos. Now, the funny thing on autos, we'd go out on training flights, and it'd be 2 rescue swimmers then, because we were out there just to train. We didn't have to worry about putting a victim in or anything. And so one of us jumped 3 times playing the victim, the other being the rescue swimmer, and we'd rotate it out. And coming back in, you get a little bit sleepy, and salt water been in your eyes, and sun's beaming in, and that helicopter's vibrating just right. And you get on the intercom, say, I'm about to close my eyes. So they know there'd be one less set of eyes. So as you doze off, that's when the pilot say, hey, you want to get back? Let's do some auto. Let's do some auto rotations. So you'd be sound asleep, and all of a sudden you'd feel the helicopter drop out from under you and wake up. And then realize, okay, they're just doing autos. And
Thomas, you don't know what auto rotation
Nope,
is.
not a clue.
Auto rotation is where, and they train for this. If you talk to pilots, they'll tell you, said, listen, if I'm in a helicopter, I'd rather lose an engine than hydraulics. You're better off.
Okay.
If you're in a fixed wing aircraft, they'll say, I'd rather lose something else other than the engine. But basically, you turn the engine off on a helicopter at altitude and then float it all the way down to the ground. Just on the power that's already stored up in the blades, and the wind as you're catching it coming down is keeping the blades rotating. And then you're going, you'll hit and skip on the skids. Look, check it out on YouTube.
Okay, yeah.
But
Auto rotation.
I've been in a helicopter probably 20, 30 times doing auto rotations before.
So that's like just to practice basically emergency landings.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
makes sense.
It builds up RPMs on the rotor blades from the airspeed of dropping.
Yeah.
And so basically they shut the fuel
Right.
to the engines. And then
they just turn
right
it
at
off.
the end they'll pull
Yeah,
it
they
out
do.
and they'll open the fuel back up and keep it running.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to know that they've got, a plan.
Well, before we would ever go out on a flight, we'd do a pre-flight inspection of the helicopter, and the pilots would do a pre-flight, basically a safety speech. And I'd always have to correct them on one part, and it was they would tell the flight mech, if you've got the swimmer on the hoist and we have an in-flight emergency, you shear the hoist, which they've got capability of, shear the hoist, drop him back in the water. Unless he's up even with the door, then pull him in.
Yeah.
And I'd stop him. I'd look at the flight mech, and I said,
I don't want to get
"That
back
sound
in.
like it? Do not ever pull me into a helicopter that you know is about to crash.
Yeah.
Shear me, cut me away.
I'll stay out here.
Have the pilot go up and left.
Yeah.
After y'all hit, then I can swim over and help y'all out. They're like, okay, then the pilots would agree. Okay, that's what the swimmer wants. That's what the swimmer gets.
Yeah.
Let's talk a minute about what was one of the most memorable rescues that you were ever involved in as a rescue swimmer.
You beat me to it.
As a rescue swimmer, we had one of my brother swimmers. His name's Brad Smarto.
This is out of New Orleans.
Just out of New Orleans. Told me one afternoon. He said, "Hey, they're having SEAL tryouts tomorrow at the pool." Our air station is on a naval air base, Belle Chase, Naval Air Station Belle Chase. He told me that, and as far as I knew, he was legit in it. So I was like, I'm gonna go try it. And it's the swim tryouts. This is the one Chad Wright talked about failing so many times. So I went home that night, kind of chill, no going out and partying in the French Quarter or anything, and got up the next morning. And my plan was go to the locker room, change into UDT shorts and T-shirt, running shoes, run a gate to gate, which is about 5 miles, warm up, loosen up, and then go to the pool. And I went to the locker room, and one of the ODs, officer of deck, petty officer, came in. He looked and he said, "Grab your gear, you're going flying." I looked at him. I said, "I'm not the duty swimmer. I'm not going anywhere." He said, we got like 8 active SAR cases going right now. Whoa. 3 helicopters up. You're about to be in the 4th. And I was like, "Let me grab my gear. I'll be out of the flight at all." And the guy was on a sailboat, and it was a freak storm that had come through and caused a lot of havoc in the Gulf. But it was one of those that it was memorable because it just went textbook, just like you had trained for. And all got spotted the boat, got in the door, got my first tap, which was drop the gunner's belt and get everything ready, and got my 3 taps, gave thumbs up, hit the water, turned, gave the I'm okay signal, swam over, got him off. He came off the boat with me, towed him back, put him in the basket, went up. And so a couple months or so later, I was sitting in a all-hands meeting and got called up to the front. And I was like, "Is this a good thing or a bad thing? What did I do now?" And this guy had actually written a letter to his congressman. Wow. And it had come back down, and it was for the whole crew. Yeah. And it, when you talk about it being just you, it's just you in the water, but it's the whole crew affecting the rescue. I'm not getting out there without the pilots, and I'm not getting back in.
You're the face that guy sees.
I'm the face that he sees. I had a buddy of mine that got to rescue a down naval aviator, and he had a heck of a flight mech on there, which is the same as a crew chief. It's just different terminology, really. But when he turned around to give the I'm okay signal, flight mech just looked at him and did this number. And you may not be old enough to remember. You remember the machine that did that? It was the credit card machine.
Credit card machine, yeah.
So he swam up to the guy and looked at him, and he said, "Petty Officer Trout, I'm your rescue swimmer for today, and will this be cash or charge?" Yeah.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Gotta have a sense of humor.
Had a buddy out of Houston that jumped and turned around to give the okay signal. And there's 5 or 6 standard hand signals. This was not a non-standard hand signal, but everybody knew what it meant when the flight mech did this, and he's sitting up in the helicopter, and he could see there were sharks in the water around. He's like,
That's kind of a
grab 'em and
universal
get 'em out. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I could tell just by you doing that. I'm like, yeah, I know what that
That's
is.
like, we're not at a Jimmy Buffett concert.
So
There's an issue.
we talked about it, before we ever started today, a little bit about the maybe some PTSD side of that, because you've done a lot of stuff. But, and you may not want to talk about this, and if you don't, that's fine. Andy asked you about, some of your more memorable rescues. What about some of the more memorable that maybe didn't turn out so well? Because we have to deal with those too.
Yeah, and the Coast Guard, really at the small boat station, Panama City, spring and summer, the water temp rises. If there's any bodies in the water, when the water was colder, they'll float up. So we'd have some that had been in the water for quite a while.
Some actual drowning victims.
Yeah.
Okay.
Main cases that always come to my mind are mainly with when I worked EMS in New Orleans and fire here, and all of mine have been, and I say all, there's a select few really, but the biggest thing they have in common, it was people that I could do absolutely nothing to help. They were do not resuscitate. They're on the scene,
Right.
and that's the ones that their faces come back.
Yeah. I can completely
We had
understand that.
Young lady that found out after the call that she was the babysitter. I thought she was the mother at the time. That in New Orleans, there's a road called Haynes Boulevard, and Haynes runs parallel with the levee for Lake Pontchartrain, and up on that levee is a railroad track for Amtrak. And babysitting, I think maybe a 5 or 6 year old that loved to go over to the lake and throw rocks in the lake, and then had an infant in a stroller, and they were crossing over the train tracks, and the stroller got stuck, and the train came, and she couldn't get the stroller loose. And so that's one that definitely sticks with you as a child. And I had some others that don't, just because it's graphic and your listeners and watchers on YouTube may not appreciate me sharing and all, and there's been some very recent that I've responded to that, kind of fell in the same guidelines.
Yeah.
No.
So
just can't do anything.
with the search and rescue stuff, how many missions did you go on? Approximately, I know you probably can't even.
Flight-wise, year and a half, I'd probably say anywhere from 12.5 to 24.
Okay.
And all on legit, not just the
That was
over
the
to you
rescue
boat and
swimmer.
all. Right.
Per
That's
year,
just
you're
not-
saying that's what you would go on?
Maybe a little bit more than that.
Okay.
Not counting and not picking on oil workers in any stretch. First of all, they're a lot bigger and meaner and tougher than I am, so I don't want them coming after me. But it was always, we'd get several calls of oil workers falling off the rigs.
Really?
And it was always the same thing. A plaid shirt, boots, no life jacket, cannot swim.
Really?
And
That's
I was like, why? And, what I'd laugh about, and you have to have that almost gallows sense of humor. You had to find humor and stuff. And so, I'd say red and blue or red and black plaid shirt. And so I look at the flight mate, you see a guy and he's in a yellow and blue plaid shirt, that ain't him. That ain't who. Leave him down there.
Leave him in the water. So that was pretty common for oil rig workers to fall off.
To fall off the rigs.
Really? That's
crazy.
And that's usually
good
when
fall.
we wind up. Oh, yeah.
That's what I was
a
just thinking. I'm like, how far
You
would
remember
that-
that's far enough that we can auto-rotate a helicopter off of.
Right.
Yeah. Now
How far is that? Like, that's like what, 100 and something, 200?
That's going to be a minute.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a
probably
good drop.
200, 300 feet or better. I mean, it's like a football field.
How many
Can
of those
you-
guys would have, that's a long fall into, when you hit water like that, it's like
It's
hitting your
concrete.
back.
It's
It's hitting
concrete.
concrete. How
Yeah,
many of
that-
these guys are, y'all just pulling out of the water that are dead?
If we find them.
If you find them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was actually a rarity. That
Wow.
we find. And
That's what I was going to
tell
ask.
people
Like, of
in-
all of them, how often did you even?
in boats we'd find there, and there have been people we'd find, but I used to tell people, I said, look, if you want to know what it's like searching for a body in the water, take a coconut, go out in a boat while you're running along, throw that coconut off, and keep going for a while and come back and find that coconut. That's looking for that human head out there.
Gosh.
So if you're not wearing a bright colored life jacket and something that's going to really stand out or reflect, it's not saying it's not going to happen, but there's a lot of
Well, there you go. You heard it here. If you want to be saved by the rescue
Bright
team,
colors.
yeah, like
If you go, and this is, I mean, seriously though, if you get out on the water, you like to go into the Gulf or even at Lake Eufaula, or whatever the case is. There's a reason that they tell you all these safety issues. Bright colored safety flotation devices. Use them. I used to hate to wear those things when I'd go out with my dad.
Oh, yeah.
My granddad couldn't stand wearing them, but I know the reason for it now. It's because if you go over in the water, we just called it, it's the great equalizer, and somebody's trying to find you, it's going to help them out.
Yeah.
Definitely something reflective. It was at night. We had a guy, and you talking about everything the opposite of the way it should be. It was Lake Pontchartrain. This guy was at a family reunion. Dark skin color, camouflage pants, went out to swim in the lake or wade in the lake and disappeared. And the reason this call was so memorable, we're flying along, we're 15, 20 feet, maybe 30 feet up, and we're just hovering along. And the flight mech sitting on the left side, he's got what we call the night sun, the real bright spotlight on the bottom of the helicopter, and he's got control for it. I'm sitting in the door on the other side because I'm wearing a wetsuit, and those things are hot if you're not in the water. So even though it's a shorty and all, I've got the handheld spotlight, and we're both looking down and flying along and kind of talking on the intercom a little bit back and forth between the four of us. And I looked up and kind of froze for a second. How I stayed this calm, I have no idea. But I got on the intercom, and I just told the pilot, Mr. Delicio, swimmer to pilot, up and left, up and left, up and left. And just as calm, he grabbed the cyclist and pulled us over. And then he looked and he said something that probably can't repeat here. And and they're on a hot mic. I mean, you can hear them at all times. They stay on hot mic pretty much while we're on the search. And he said, "Good eyes." And I said, I probably wouldn't have spotted it either. I said, but there was a squirrel on that limb. And he looked mighty angry when we made eye contact. And he got lulled in and started looking down. And we were near the bank, near the shore, and there was a huge oak tree. Yeah. And I look up, and we're getting really, really close to a limb, which would have put us down in the water really fast. And being that low, there'd have been no time for recovery, for the pilot trying to recover the aircraft and all. And so, and he was a great pilot. He was, like I said before, he was type B personality, laid back, great, fantastic pilot. And he just kind of got lulled in a little bit and,
like it just happens, like your focus just drifts.
I just happened to look up and I was like, oh, this ain't where we want to be right now. We need to move over.
Right.
But
so the guy that you were looking for,
we did find him. Okay. He was deceased. So I just lowered down on the hoist and pulled him up to shore, and the local EMS unit, it was on the North Shore. It wasn't New Orleans EMS, but they came down and met, and I turned him over to him, and we went back to the station. But it did give the family some closure. We found, and that's a good thing on finding somebody, even if it is about a recovery, is the family gets some closure on it.
So what factors were in play that affected your decision to get out of the Coast Guard?
We so back then we were all trained to EMT basic level, and we had corpsmen, flight medics, basically at the air station. So if it was a person in the water or a vessel in distress, we got to respond. If it was a medevac, they responded. So we started losing our EMT skills. So don't use it, lose it type situation. Right. So the first thing they did was our chief and supervisors got us hooked up with one of the local hospitals, but it was on the West Bank in New Orleans, which for the most part isn't as bad as it's more suburban than urban New Orleans. Mm-hmm. So we didn't get to see a whole lot. And basically we'd go over there, like every Friday, one of us would go, 4 or 5 of us, we'd rotate through on just working there in the ER with them. I was kind of the black cloud then. I got to see stuff there that normally even the ER staff said, man, we never get this stuff and all.
They hated to see you come.
Yeah, exactly. It's him again. There's that white cloud.
Oh, no, not him again.
So they set up a program with us working New Orleans EMS. And I showed up my first day and was kind of standing in the back in the ambulance bay This tall, skinny guy come walking by, and he said, you the volunteers supposed to be riding with us? I said, I guess. He said, yeah, you are. He said, I'll be right back. So he went up to the office, and he came back, and he was kind of at a trot. He said, get in the truck. We got a call. And it wound up being a cardiac arrest on the golf course. They had him in the clubhouse. And the people there didn't know CPR, but they were smart enough. This guy was full of fluid, so they had him on the couch, rolled on the side, draining. So we grabbed the equipment and got him in, and got him off the couch and laid flat. And said, there's no way the paramedic's going to be able to intubate this guy with all that fluid. I turned to grab the suction. By the time I turned back around, EJ, the tall, skinny guy, which wound up being great friends, he just tubes in, and he had digitally intubated. He stuck his fingers in, felt for vocal cords, slid the tube in between, brought his hand back out, and we started bagging. So worked him a little bit, got him to the hospital, and I went out with it was usually in New Orleans as a paramedic and the basic's the driver. So I came back out with the basic and helping him get the ambulance cleaned up and the stretcher cleaned and new sheets. And we just now got a chance to introduce ourselves. I mean, things happen so fast. Wow. And EJ came out and he said, hey, y'all come back in. There's something you need to see. Well, they hadn't brought in any gunshots or anything cool. You know, what he said, just come in and see. And we came in, and the guy shook our hands and thanked us.
Wow.
And I was like, man, I don't ever get this on the helicopter. This is cool. This is what I
all the ones
do,
I'm dealing with are trying to kill me.
Then you come to find out later that it's, you know, like the ratio's basically
1 to
1,000 to 1. You know, it's
really?
Like,
That was a rare case.
Yeah, I got my one right off the bat.
We're searching for it the rest of the time.
But you know, really did enjoy riding with them, and so started doing PRN part time, working with them, and debated about it back and forth quite a bit on getting out or not. I loved being a rescue swimmer. Don't get me wrong. I did not care for the shop work. I did not like packing float bags, which is putting 15 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound box. And, you know, if you don't get it just right, you got to start all over again. And it's got to be just right every time, you know. So
it's like law enforcement. Police officers love the job because of the 3% of action that goes on. The rest of it's, you know, paperwork and
exactly
stuff. So.
Exactly. And so I got out and went to work with the New Orleans full time. I had a blast there. Had some excellent partners.
So the fire department there?
No, it was separate. It was actually a member of the health department at the time, or division of the health department at the time. Our head administrator was named Dawn Orgeron, and bless her heart, and she's passed on now. But Dawn was she wasn't politically affiliated, but if you picture Janet Reno, she cussed like a sailor and talked like she learned to talk in a sawmill. So her husband, CJ, was a great guy. He was Canadian veteran and all, Vietnam vet from Canada. Great guy, real chilled out and all. And it was kind of like that opposites attract, but how did you two ever?
That's funny.
And I was young enough at the time. I liked to instigate stuff, and I would do stuff to upset Dawn. And one day I was in her office, and she started slamming her hand, and she actually broke her little finger.
Oh my gosh!
And we had, not too long after that, my crew and another crew got called in. The other crew got there first, and they had sat, and she had a couch right across from her desk. And this guy was sitting over in the corner of the couch, and I just walked in and looked, and I said, get up here in my spot. And he looked and laughed, and Don looked at him and said, you are in Reuben's spot. You need to move. Like, you're in here enough. You've got your own spot. And I was like, yeah, you're in it. You need to move. But I went into work one Sunday night, and they had messed up on the schedule and actually scheduled too many of us. So the supervisor looked, and it was another supervisor named Randy Carstater, and Randy looked and he said, hey, trucks are full. He said, you want to ride with me tonight? And I said, sure. So we reviewed all the paperwork from the night before. I will never forget, it was a Sunday night. Had the little 12-inch black and white TV up on the filing cabinet, and Married with Children was on. And they called out for a gunshot call a few blocks away. Randy looked at me and said, you want to jump that? And I said, yeah, why not? I ran in my truck, got my personal jump bag. And I'll never forget Randy looking at me when I got in the car, and he said, well, you didn't need to run. It's just right up the road. And Randy's usually one of those that drives like a bat out of hell. And so I knew he was going to be in a hurry, but he really wasn't. That one night he wasn't. And we were in what's called a sprint car, and it was basically like a police car, only it was red lights and had the New Orleans EMS logo. And an old square body Capri. And, so we came out from the station and made a left and came up to Esplanade. This is right across from City Park, if you're familiar with New Orleans any at all. We're on Moss Street, came up, hit Esplanade, and Esplanade goes all the way down to the river, and that's where the French Market ends. We got on Esplanade. Before we turned on, I cleared him, I said, "You're clear, right?" And we turned on, and I looked up and I said, "You see the bicyclist? You got a bicyclist on the right?" He said, "Yeah, I got him." And as soon as we passed the bicyclist, I saw something, and we hit, and it was a pedestrian. And he spun, his head knocked out my passenger window on the car. So, of course, slamming on brakes. Randy called it in as a 108. And in New Orleans, there's 1055 and 108. And 1055, and the way it was first ever explained to me, and it always stuck, 1055s, I'm getting my butt kicked. 108s, I'm getting shot at. So there's a difference in just saying needing 41, needing backup. Right. The way 108 is written, Randy called it in correctly. That we're not being shot at, but there's an officer in distress, basically. Yeah. And right in front of where we hit him at, right in front of where we were at, it was like a 5-point intersection. And ran back, checked on the guy, looked at Randy. I said, "What do you need?" He said, "My junk bag out of the trunk." I ran and grabbed it, came back. Randy grabbed stuff, and it seemed like Randy dropped down, his knees hit the ground, stood up and said, "He's intubated," start bagging him. I mean, that was the fastest intubation I've ever seen, and the tube was in the right place. Looked up, and it was like Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. There were police cars and EMS. And Randy, in the meantime, had gotten on the radio when I was running and said, "We're both okay. We've hit a pedestrian. We need 1 unit here, code 3." And by the time he said that, everybody was coming. Right. Ambulances, our rescue truck, police department, everybody was responding. So we get the guy up. It amputated his right leg at the knee, all but a little piece of skin. So it's kind of like just move it on with. Talking to the crew that transported him the next day, he coded right before they took him to Tulane Hospital. He coded there, or right before they got to Tulane. So that was, a big standout, and it still does. We found out later from the police department when they did door-to-door interviews that it was an 89-year-old man, that he was supposedly carried a card in his pocket that said if he was ever struck by an automobile, the driver was not to be held responsible because he tested his reflexes by waiting to the last minute to try to cross the road in front of the vehicle.
Wow. Are you serious?
But, yep.
At 89?
89 years old. So
okay.
Our first person I saw staff-wise was our field ops boss, Red Hewling. Red showed up, and, of course, that's to be expected. Then a few minutes later, here comes Dawn. And I was like, "Oh, crap, here's Dawn. This is not." Dawn walked up. She looked at me, and she said, "What do you need?" And first she said, "Are you okay? Is there anything wrong?" And I said, "I've got some glass fragments in my ear from where his head busted out the window. I was trying to get down in the floorboard at the time." I said, "Other than that," I said, "I'm fine." I said, "I don't need." And she said, "What do you need?" At the time I smoked, so I said, "Need a cigarette." She smoked too, so I was expecting her to give me one of hers. I said, "And a soda, something to drink. My mouth's real dry." There was a 7-Eleven half a block or so up, and Don walked up to the 7-Eleven, bought me a pack of cigarettes, bought me a lighter, bought me a Mountain Dew, which at the time, later I was thinking, that's all I needed was all that caffeine. On top of
caffeine and nicotine.
Adrenaline rush you had.
But, Don went out of her way to take care of us that night, and I was like, oh, well, this is kind of a different side. But,
but that's what somebody in her position is supposed to do.
Exactly. Exactly.
We talk
leadership.
We talk about that a lot here. That is a good example of somebody that you would want to follow.
Oh, she is. She is. And she'd take you in and chew you out, take you in the office and chew you out. But after you walked out,
you still felt
it was over.
Pat you on the back so you get back to work.
It was over. There was a big debate there there was the biggest issue, I think, at the time was you had to be, there were 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. trucks and 7 a.m., 7 p.m. trucks. Later, we brought up a swing shift, and I got to work that. That was noon to midnight. That was the absolute
That was the best one.
But you went on the clock. If you were on a 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. clock truck, you went on the clock at 6 p.m., but you were supposed to be in your district at that time. Mm-hmm. But you had to check off your truck, make sure everything was loaded on, everything was on. So there was this big thing of, I'm not showing up till I go on the clock, and back and forth. And so one day, just to agitate Dawn. I never had a problem showing up early, making sure everything was good to go before we went to the district. But we were basically an all hands meeting. That topic came up. People would argue, and I just looked up and I said, "Wait, I see Abraham Lincoln abolished that stuff a long time ago." I thought her ears were going to blow off the top of her. I mean, her head exploded and all.
Yeah, way to poke the bear.
Oh yeah, and that's all it really was. It was just aggravating.
Well, I want to fast forward. We are running a good little bit here, but I don't want to lose any time in how you got down or back here and got in with the Dothan Fire Department. So if we could, I think that might be a good time for us to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a minute.
Hey there, I just wanted to take a second to say thank you so much for watching this episode of The Shepherd Station. If you feel this has added some value to your life, it would mean so much to us if you would share this episode with someone else. It helps us so much when you do that. It would go a long way in supporting our mission to help men become better fathers, husbands, and leaders. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and give us a like. If you're listening to us through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen to podcasts, follow us, leave us a review, and let us know how we're doing. We want to hear from you. All right, that's all I've got. Now, let's get back to the episode.
All right, everybody, we're back from the break. Reuben's going to tell us about his time when he came back to Dothan, Alabama, and started with the fire department here.
So I'm still in New Orleans, and I was having a blast. I was having the time of my life, and that necessarily wasn't a good thing.
Right.
Been there.
I was, in my 20s. I was single. I was living in Sodom or Gomorrah.
Yeah.
You take it, but yeah, it was. I was living in New Orleans, but I saw where I was going, and I knew if I didn't do something. And it was one of those wake up epiphanies. Mm-hmm. If you don't do something,
was there a specific event that had that epiphany, or was it just a combination of
it was a very hard party the night before.
Well,
very hard party.
Well, it's good that you realize that yourself before you had something happen or somebody else.
It is. I was truly blessed in that.
You had discernment
because I was told.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I didn't think of it on my own.
Yeah.
I was told. It came to. It was. By definition, it was an epiphany that, hey, you need to do something, and you probably just need to remove yourself from this environment.
Those epiphanies can be hard and painful sometimes.
Oh, they are, because they threw me a going away party, and if there's people in New Orleans are great. They really are. That's the hardest workers I've ever seen, but they're the hardest partiers I've ever seen. And it's like when it's time to do, a lot of them, and especially if you get outside of New Orleans, these people don't have acquaintances. Mm-hmm. You're either like family or they'll cut your throat.
Yeah.
There's no in between.
Huh?
And you know exactly how you stand with them too. And all that, and that's something I really loved about them and appreciated. It wasn't, what's he saying behind my back, or you need. But yeah, they threw me that going away party, and that was tough.
Oh,
I mean, these are people that I loved, and we got along so great with each other, and it was. I'm not just leaving EMS going over to fire or whatever. I'm moving back home.
Right.
And it was a culture shock moving back to Dothan, Alabama. Yeah. Let me tell you, from New Orleans, especially back then. Yeah. Because it was, there you could get whatever you wanted any day of the week. Mm-hmm. Walking down half a block from the apartment complex to the K&B drugstore, if you wanted a bottle of vodka to watch NFL football or whatever, and all of a sudden move back here, and it was like,
No sales
Where are we
on
partying
Sunday.
tonight? Nobody's having a party tonight. And they were like, well, that is kind of why I moved back, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, but it was that, oh, what are we doing now?
So what was like at that point? I assume you're a Christian. At that point, was that kind of your religious realization, or
It didn't come right then. I would say I was a non-practicing
okay?
Christian. I still felt like I was a Christian, and I still believed, but I was not practicing at the time. I moved back. Was going to go to work with one ambulance. Well, back then there was only Pilchers. Kara wasn't here yet.
So you hadn't already started the process while you were.
No,
Because a lot of people, I want to move back home.
You speak of move home.
That was I did thinking that I had a plan, and man plans, God laughs, right? So, and I had worked since I was 15 years old. I had my first summer job when I was 15, and and worked all the way through till then, boot camp, in reserves, working a part-time job, and got back and they were like, called Pilchers, and I was like, oh yeah, they'll hire me. I've got all this experience and all. I was a basic, and Pilchers only hired paramedics at the time. I had dropped back, and they only hired basics, or only hired paramedics at the time. So I actually picked up a job with Manpower out at Sony, and then got on with Flowers. That job with Manpower, Sony, that was a interesting place to work. They wanted you to clock in at a certain time so you could be at your job site at a certain time, but they weren't going to pay you. Kind of like the thing on the ambulance. Right. I was like, nah, I don't know. And then they wanted me to work as a Manpower employee, making minimum wage, training somebody how to do my job that was going to get paid 3 times more instead of just hiring me straight out. And I'm like, nah, but we're not.
Plus, it was boring.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It was very, very. Right. But I got hired on at Flowers, working in the ERs, PCA.
Yeah.
And it was fun. I enjoyed it. There was great people there, but it kind of scared. I almost moved back to New Orleans. One of the rescue squads here, my first taste of EMS here, one of the rescue squads rolled in a patient and they were doing chest compressions and the patient was trying to fight them back. Yeah. I was like,
probably
that's
don't need
a
to be doing
probably good
chest
sign
compressions.
that you don't need to be doing
Yeah,
chest.
right.
And
Like,
I was
what-
like, Dawn, you still got my spot open over
Yeah.
there.
Is it because they didn't know what they were doing? Those dudes were wide awake.
No, they didn't know what they were doing. And everybody in the ER was upset about it. It was the pre chance that it happened. It wasn't how
Okay, that was like
just the first thing that I saw.
Yeah,
And
right,
I was like,
right.
oh.
Wow.
But things got better. Now, there were some other differences that back then, things have changed now, but back then, the paramedics here had to call for orders to even start an IV. Yeah. And I looked and I was like, wait a minute.
It's not the protocol.
New Orleans, you better not call for orders if you don't have an IV already established, because if they give you orders to push a medication, you don't have that route already established. Why are you wasting their time?
Right.
So, it was, like I said, it was an adjustment period.
It's come a long way.
It has come a long way here. The EMS has come a long way here, and they're doing a fantastic job. Another thing I noticed was there'd be 2 of us on the scene. The paramedic and the EMT basic or intermediate. But we would work if it was a trauma, that's a load and go. Definitive care for that patient is in surgery. It's not even in the emergency room. That's just a stop off to help stabilize a little bit more. You're not going to fix things till you get to surgery. But if it's a medical call, a critical medical or a cardiac arrest or whatever, we've got the same drugs in the box and the same capabilities that they have in the emergency room. In New Orleans, we'd sit there, 2 of us, and work a code until we had gone through almost everything in the box, and we were looking at each other at ideas. Hey, you want to push some Narcan? How about some Bicar? Just going through some stuff that were 5th and 6th protocols down the line. And here it was almost like a load and go. Even Cardiac was like, why are you rushing to get this patient loaded? We could be doing all this right now.
Right now, yeah.
And that's changed quite a bit too. It really has. So.
So how did you go from that to fire?
I applied for the fire department as soon as I started at Flowers.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
got an interview. Gerald McDaniel was the
Gerald was
fire
still
chief then.
He was my baseball coach in Little League.
Oh, wow.
Matter of fact, Gerald lived probably about a little less than a mile from me when I was growing up.
Flossie Fallon was his secretary. And for those that don't remember
her.
Flossie,
Yeah.
Flossie sounded like she smoked about 2 packs of Pall Mall a day. A little bit higher pitch with it, but she was great. She took care of us. If you were about to lose accumulated vacation time or whatever, she would call and tell you, unless you did something to make her mad. And then she'd say, he's about to lose vacation time. He's about to find out the hard way. But she was great. She was the one that called me and, Reuben Pohl, you want to work for Dothan Fire Department? Yes, man. You be down here. And so I came. But did you ever know Jimmy Ward?
Yeah. Yeah.
Jimmy Ward and I passed in the doorway in Gerald's office.
Yeah.
He had just that's back under Clinton when they had the RIF program. He was up at Fort Rucker Fire Department, and he got RIF'd from there. And he and I passed each other in the doorway.
What year did you go to work for Dothan Fire?
94, January of 94.
Okay. I was curious.
What station did you go to?
I went, first I was a runner, so it was, been filling it all. But I really started off at Southside with the old Southside, St. Andrews and Corners with Alan Fowler and Buck Adams and Mike Rogers and Donnell Adams. That was, and Gerald Helms was the battalion chief, and he was talking about where people were going permanently. And I said, I'm pretty happy where I'm at. And he said, are you? And I said, yeah. He said, okay. So that's where he left me. And that was a firefighting crew. First day I walked in there, Alan sat down with me, Captain Fowler, and we sat down in the kitchen. And he basically said, I've got 2 rules. I said, okay. He said, when that alarm goes off, get on the truck right then. He slept in a recliner chair with just a doorway between him and the engine.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And they'd ring it down, the horns would go off, dispatch would tell where the fire was at, and then they'd do it a second time. And by the time they started to ring it down again, he was on the truck. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't on the truck, you got left. And so he told me, he said, when that bell goes off, you get on the truck. Right. He said, and when we get there, he said, you bust your butt for the first 10 minutes. He said, because after 10 minutes, either the fire's out or we're going to be there for a while, so it's time to settle down and dig in a little bit.
Defensive, yeah.
And he was right. But he was great to learn under.
Did you go in thinking, man, I just did the Coast Guard, I did search and rescue, all these things, and this is going to be a piece of cake?
No, because I knew I hadn't fought a fire.
Okay.
I mean, you go through firefighter training when you're shipboard in the Coast Guard and all, and learn shipboard firefighting. But I felt like I had a little bit of an upper hand as EMT and all, but I knew I was stepping into something new. Now, the great thing was I had some fantastic mentors in Mike Rogers and Alan Fowler. Alan, I mean, he was old, white-haired, kind of high-pitched, but he would fight you for the nozzle.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, you would fight him. He would. We had one on Pine and Headland, and it was a big 2-story house that had been divided into 4 apartments. And to tell you how bad it was burning, when we got called, Scott Dees, that's now retired from the fire department, was over at Westgate Fire Station. And when the call came in, he was in bed. He said the alarm back then would go off at all the stations, and then you'd listen.
Everybody got woke up.
Everybody got woke up. So he got up to walk up front to get some water out of the water fountain, and he looked out the glass door from Westgate Fire Station and could see the glow in the sky over on Headland Avenue, downtown Dothan. Oh, wow. He said it looked like the sun was rising.
Pine burning.
Oh, yeah. It was burning. We got there and stretched the line, and Gerald Helms, battalion chief, came by. He said, we're fighting this one defensive. Do not go inside. Yeah. Yes, sir. He went around the corner. Alan looked at me, and I looked at him, and Alan said, "Let's go." And a little while later, we heard, I wasn't worried about going in, but there was some stairs, and you could tell it was stairs just by the way the fire was burning. Mm-hmm. And Alan started heading towards those stairs, and that's when I started getting a little bit worried. And Joel came back by and got in the doorway and started screaming at us. Yeah. And we came out. And I thought I told us. I was following my cat. Those
are the days before everybody had comms.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Didn't have comms. Alan didn't wear an air pack.
Yeah.
Alan did not wear an air pack until Dennis Reuben got here and made him wear an air pack, and Alan still wouldn't put a mask on.
Really?
He'd put that air pack on his back to say he had the air pack on. Yeah. But he was one of those, if it was a shotgun-style house, he'd grab the nozzle and walk in the front door and out the back door, and the fire was out by the time he went out the back door.
Wow.
Smoke eater.
I didn't get to see it, but I've been told the same story by various people, and it all kind of went together, corroborated. That he did that in shorts and flip-flops and a shirt and he wore one of those old Robin Hood looking hunting hats, camouflage hats. And the guys wouldn't go in because the fire was too hot and it was too far gone. And Alan walked up in flip-flops and blue jean shorts and a T-shirt and grabbed the nozzle and walked in the front and out the back, and the fire was pretty much out by the time he got done. He was just that guy. Yeah. I mean, he was phenomenal.
Wow, that's amazing.
And these were the days we still had a small rescue trucks.
Yep, still ran three rescue
trucks, one out of Central, East Side, and Westgate.
Westgate.
Never did understand rolling a full fire truck to all the rescue calls that we would have, or the medical calls that we'd go to.
So the men, and not saying which is right or wrong, they could not afford to put a rescue truck in every station. Mm-hmm. And so that was, Dennis Reuben got here and decided on this, and our present chief now was the rescue lieutenant at the time, and told him he was taking away his rescue trucks. And Chief Williams, at the time, Lieutenant Williams, did not like that a bit. Yeah. But it was 6 people per shift did 90% of the work. Mm-hmm. And it was 3 stations. Mm-hmm. So the way to evenly distribute that around was to roll a paramedic engine.
The paramedics never got to sleep.
No.
Of course, they made a premium too. They did.
They did. But yeah, they didn't, especially guys out of Station 1. Yeah. It was up all night and going, gunshots and stabbings. And, I tell people, and I learned this even back when I was in New Orleans, and just like with cops, that's why you want to become a paramedic. Yeah. Is you want that, that adrenaline stuff, the gunshots, the stab. Once you become one, in my opinion, the really good ones, they transverse over to that medical, because you learn trauma is the same to a paramedic. Stop the bleeding, C-collar, spine board, IVs, airway, and transport. Diesel, bolus diesel, transport. Medical, you've got to sit there and figure out what's going on. You've got to read that EKG. You've got to figure out what's going on, or why they're in respiratory distress, or, if they're going into anaphylaxis or whatever, and then how to treat it and what medications to give. And it's a much broader spectrum there to work with. And that's where the really good medics start coming in. And I can treat this trauma over and over. You can treat that trauma. You can treat that.
You got to diagnose the medical issues.
Exactly. So that was one of the most interesting things, becoming paramedic and learning. Okay, it's not just being, and even as a basic, you would see that, you would start seeing other medics, and say, okay, this is how that works.
I went to EMT basic in 1987 at a Wallace.
Out at Wallace.
And Walter Powell out there,
Bubba,
and Larry Cockrell and Marvin Hart were the instructors out there. And then I did my rotations out of Central with Larry Cockrell and Marvin Hart on the rescue truck with those guys, and did some rotations I had to do some at Pilcher's, of course. And Joey Pilcher back then kept after me then. He said, go get your intermediate. That's when they had an intermediate. Go get your intermediate and you can come down here and work part-time, I never did, but, worked at the ER and Flowers and Medical Center. I enjoyed it. I really did.
It's fun. It's riding third party out and sitting in the middle in the rescue truck, and you're all kind of bunched in there. But it's fun.
So you transitioned over, you rode the small paramedic truck.
Started off, and right as I was getting into it is when it started going. As a matter of fact, they had ordered one of the new engines, and they were a taller cab, and it wouldn't fit in Station 4. So we had to put a rescue truck and just park it in that back parking lot behind there. Yeah. And me and now Deputy Chief Webb ran that truck, and there's something we continue to kid each other about.
I've been on several big scenes in my PD days with Pete Webb, and if there was a face, if you looked up incident command in the dictionary, you'd see Pete Webb's picture.
That's it. That's it.
Really, he's very, very organized. I mean, the guy's got it.
Yeah, he was. Well, he was.
He's firefighter in the Air Force.
He
also.
was in the Air Force, but I believe he was the chief down there at Herbert.
Yeah, he's like a command master chief or something in the Air Force too.
Command master sergeant. Yeah, I believe so. But Pete's definitely got it together, and it's funny because our offices. It's kind of weird the way the building's shaped. Our doors aren't right next to each other, but our offices are separated by one wall, and it's so thin. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If I sneeze, he tells me, "God bless you," and vice versa. So when he first moved in, I walked over there and I said, "Chief, just wanted to let you know if there's anything you're discussing in your office that needs to be between point A and point B, and I'm in my office, call me and tell me, knock on the wall, whatever you need to do, I'll get up and go. Yeah. I don't need to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to be privy to it, but I will hear it if I'm sitting in my office." And so every once in a while I'll hear a conversation start, and I say, I need to go do an inspection. We need to go back over to this house where we ran this investigation to see if I missed something.
Yeah, that's a public safety family there too. His wife, she's a flight nurse with survival flight, and his son's a firefighter.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tends to stay in the family a lot of times.
Oh yeah. So,
it does.
What about one of the most memorable calls? I think you mentioned one specific address in some of the notes you sent me as one of the most traumatic calls, probably one of the worst ones you'd ever been to. Let's talk about that one, then we'll talk about the resuscitation one you said was one of the best ones. Okay.
So this was kind of a date and address that sticks. Is 716 North Lena Street. Right across from the housing.
McRae Homes. Yep. I know that because that address. What's the address of McRae Homes?
Was it 718? Wasn't it?
705.
705. Right. I forgot, but I know McRae Homes.
I've been dispatched to McRae Homes a heap of times.
I've literally had a 10100 car chase through McRae.
Through McRae. Yeah. So if you go there at McRae's on your left, you're headed north on Lena. There's three little houses, all identical to each other on the other side. Yep. So November 25th of 2002, it was a day that looks just like this. Mm-hmm. I mean, beautiful day. It was our shift before Thanksgiving because we worked 24 on, 48 off. So we worked that Monday off, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'd be back Thanksgiving. We decided to have our Thanksgiving lunch that Monday because people were either off or moved to different stations to cover for other people that were off. Mm-hmm. And we did. And we had that big, huge meal, and Reuben ate. And I was sergeant, acting captain. So our captain was already off. And call came out about 12:30, between 12:30, 1 o'clock. There was structure fire. Person trapped inside, resident still inside.
Now, hold on a second. What year was this?
2002.
Okay, go ahead.
So, of course, we all flew back from the table, ran out, got in our gear, got in the truck. And one of my firefighters was slow getting his gear on, and the truck company beat us out, and it made me mad. I was not happy. Pulling out, I won't say the only thing on my mind, but it was on my mind. When we get back, get everything cleaned up and ready to go, we're doing turnout drills for hours until I drop.
Until you get tired.
I was not a happy camper about the truck. Even though there's just 2 on there and there's 4, I still didn't go well. So anyway, we pulled up on scene. We stopped, dropped one guy off at the hydrant right there on the corner of Lena and Chickasaw. Chickasaw right there? Chickasaw. Dropped him off, came on up. Moses Liebel was the battalion chief, and Moses was standing there when I was coming out the door. He said, "Hurry up, truck company's already inside." And I'm about moving as fast as I can, chief, but we're going. We grabbed a hose line, stretched it in, and I noticed going up from probably about 2.5 feet, off 2.5 feet down in the doorway was perfectly clear. From there up, it looked like there was a black curtain. Literally, that's the first thing I thought was there was a curtain on the door. It was black smoke. It just wasn't moving. So, excuse me. Got inside, there was a screen door on the house, so the more I tried to pull on the hose, the more it tried to pull that screen door against. So my firefighter finally finished getting his stuff on. He came in, and I told him, I said, "Go open that screen door, feed me some hose." Turned around, Billy Mims was on the truck company, and Billy was right there beside me. He had the thermal camera. Back then it was the old handheld. And he was looking, he said, "It's right behind that door." He said, "You ready?" The fire.
Yep.
The fire. He's looking with that thermal camera, and he could see the fire through the door. He said, "It's right behind that door." He said, "Are you ready?" I said, "Yeah, get it." So we were both down on our knees. He opened the door. Fire came out on us, opened the nozzle, and used that firefighter term, started pouring the Kool-Aid to it.
Yeah.
And knocked it all back in. One of the weirdest phenomenon I've ever seen in my 57 years. When I pushed that fire back in, there was a sphere of fire about the size of a basketball right here. It just sat there, not touching anything, not on, just hanging in the air. And I kind of
weird.
turned and looked.
Explain that. How does
I don't know.
Is that something
I
that had
don't know.
been
It was
taught
just
in fire school?
burning
I
gases.
mean, did you?
Nope.
Nothing
I've
ever
never,
been.
I've
just
never
gases
seen it.
mixing right
just,
there, and it was just on
and it was
fire.
still hot, and it was just part that didn't get pushed back in.
Whoa.
It's like a
I think
demon or something.
it was.
That's what I'd be like.
That's kind of what it felt like at the time. Now looking back, it was probably, soot and smoke and all. The only thing that is it didn't get hot enough to burn those particles. So maybe that's what was rolling there. After I pushed it back in, it came back out, and all the water in the world went pushing it back in. And it kept getting worse and worse. And I started deciding I'm about to have to get out of here. And it was going through my mind to leave the nozzle or not, because the door is 10, 12 foot away behind me. It's not that far to get out. And I started thinking about Billy. I said, if I take off and leave the nozzle, Billy's going to be in here without the nozzle. But if I leave the nozzle, Billy's going to be here without the nozzle in his hand.
Yeah.
And by the time it increased and got much worse. And all I could see was orange, and it felt like I had a mask full of hornets. And so I started bending down. My voice hit the pitch of about a 6-year-old girl at the time, trying to scream at Billy. Billy reached in and grabbed and pulled, and we both went out. My helmet got knocked off. My hood got knocked askew, and got out. First thing that happens, guys were running up. It hit me in the head, and I then realized my hair was still smoldering and smoking.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow. So they're putting me out and sat me down on a curb. And the whole time I'm trying to find my helmet and my mask, because the only thing going through my mind is I have never had a fire kick my butt, and it ain't about to happen today. And so I'm trying to get back in. Mose was there pushing me back. People were coming back from around the side of the house. Mose, come to find out, I never heard it on the radio. Mose had called a mayday. Mayday, mayday, mayday. We got firefighters. We just had a flash over, firefighters trapped inside. So they had set me on a curb across the road there at McRae. And they brought the stretcher down and everything. And I was like, I'm not going to the hospital. I don't need to go. And Mo was like, you're going. I said, no, I'm not. I'm fine. I need to get back in there. He said, you're not going back in. And we're kind of going back and forth. So I stood up and I went to step back. And I forgot that curb was a little bit higher than normal.
Oh, gosh.
So I didn't fall, but I tripped and I kind of stumbled. And when I did, Mose told me in so many words that certain parts of my anatomy were about to go to the hospital. So, I stood up. I had agreed to go and was going to walk down. I said, I don't need the stretcher. And I stood up and I tripped over the curb. And they're like, you're getting on the stretcher. And I was like, oh, my gosh. So we went in, got there, and then everybody started falling in. They drew blood gases and all. And Bose got there after everything, and he says, "Somebody, we got your gear back at the station." And I said, "Well, good." I said, "I'm going to need it as soon as I get out of here." And he said, "Well, you're not going." I said, "Yeah, I'm coming back. I want to get back on that horse." It was my mentality was, I don't want to do anything that's going to mess with me later. And so Chief Sam Crawford was fire chief then. Chief Crawford came in, and Eddie Munn was fire marshal. Yeah. Eddie had told me he was making a round of the house, and he saw the windows, through the windows of the fire room. He said he was trying to get back to tell us not to open it until they got those windows vented. Yeah. And he said after we opened the door, when it rolled out, he said the only thing that went through his mind was, we're about to have body recovery on 2 firefighters. Mm.
Wow.
He said there was no doubt in his mind at that time we were both dead. Mm. So they all came in, we're talking, and Moses and I are kind of going back and forth. And Dr. Benz came in and brought one of the little trays in. He started doing, your blood gases look fine, blah, 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 everything's good. And I was like, good, I can go back to work. He said, spit in here, and I spit, and when I did, it was as black as your T-shirt. He looked, and Mo said, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, no work for 24 hours. Yeah. I was like, oh. But wound up, I had a few burns on my arm from, I guess, shielding, and singed hair, and
that what made your hair gray?
Funny afterward. That day had a lot to do with it. But the funny thing after the fact, I had lost one eyebrow and half my mustache. So of course,
do we have pictures of that?
I don't know.
We need to put those up.
It would be funny because Donnie Driscoll had retired now. Donnie and I were passing a hallway, and he would hold a finger and fingers up covering, because we're firefighters. Hey, I was worried about you, but now you're fine. We're going to ride you about this one. But
so that's a thing. Like, okay, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but there's a show that like has firefighting in it and all this stuff. And one of the things you see is like this guy comes out of a fire, and he's fine. Presumably totally fine. He went in without anything on, went into this crazy fire, comes out totally fine. Later dies of a heart attack because, of the pheromones, I guess, or the fumes. Or whatever.
From that and from the adrenaline rush, from everything, and it
so
taxes
like
your
you said,
system.
they're checking
really
your
hard.
blood gas.
Right, they're checking for carbon monoxide,
like your poison, basically.
Right, the chemicals,
making sure that I hadn't inhaled so much.
So even though you felt fine, you could still be
carbon monoxide poisoning. First of all, it's odorless, it's tasteless. Mm-hmm. You don't know it. The only signs and symptoms are a headache. Kind of get cherry red in the face, but if you're not looking in the mirror, you're not going to see that. Yeah. There's an old joke, and supposedly it happened, but probably, I don't know. But the woman that called 911 had the firefighters come, wanted to replace the batteries in her carbon monoxide detector because that noise kept giving her a headache and making her feel flush in the face. And it's like, no, there's nothing wrong with it. But they ran all the tests, everything was fine, and then when I spit in the cup, he was like, nah, you're not going anywhere.
Well, a lot of people don't realize too is if you have a fire, but there's a lot of common household items that are toxic once they're heated.
That are much, much worse today than even when I started. Yeah. And you think, well, things are progressing towards safety. They're not. They're progressing toward how can we build it cheaper and what products can we use, man-made products that are petroleum-based. And used to it was, you had, don't quote me on the numbers, I should have looked this up before I came, but like 15 minutes or so, 10 minutes to get out of a house fire. And now it's like down to 90 seconds per minute just because of how the furniture's made now. And
you said something when we were talking about that burning sphere by your head. And I've never fought a fire, and I've been at plenty of them, but I've never fought a fire, and you've seen a lot of that. It reminds me of something. Is it a true statement that fire is really kind of like a living creature?
Yeah, in the fact that what do we need to survive? We need heat. Mm-hmm. We need nutrition, which is our fuel, and we need oxygen. And we need all those things to work together in a chain reaction. Mm-hmm. That's the same thing the fire needs.
Well, it sounds like that fire was coming after you is what it was.
It felt like. We sat down, and if you knew Mose Saliba, Mose was a very, very analytical person, and could what if you to death on a scenario, and you keep thinking you've won, and he kind of changes the rules. But he and I sat down the next shift that evening out in the bay and talked. And one of the scenarios was, what pattern did I have that nozzle on? And I was pretty sure that I had it on a good straight stream and not a big fog, because that fog pattern is pushing air in that cone. So it's feeding it and causing it to roll back out and chase. I still think that I had it on straight, because I'm a big firm believer in straight. New York City does not even have fog nozzles. They have, and so you kind of follow that I'm still a believer in straight stream. Now that I'm in the fire marshal's office as a fire investigator, maybe don't straight stream my evidence too hard for too long, but there were different things that we looked at, but it was not a backdraft, but it was similar to that it had burned up so much oxygen in that room that when we opened the door,
You're looking for more.
It was chasing it out. It was coming for oxygen.
Wow.
And this house was basically, I was talking about how small it is. It was only one room wide. There's a den and a bedroom, bedroom, the door that goes to the kitchen. And in the kitchen, there's a toilet off in the corner. I mean, the room was 2 rooms. The whole house was basically 2 rooms.
Shotgun style house.
The epitome, the definition of shotgun house. A lot of people call them that now that really aren't. But you could fire a shotgun from the front door and all the pellets would most likely go out the back. So that was another thing, it was like this tiny little house.
I'm assuming nobody was in the house.
No, the guy was not home at the time.
Okay.
But normally he would have been at that time, and that's what the neighbors were thinking. So, it wasn't well, if we tell them this, they'll get here quicker or anything. They really thought it was a single resident and all.
Wow.
So.
That's amazing.
Well, Reuben, you still working actively with the fire department, and don't really have any thoughts about retiring anytime really soon. But
right off the bat,
Yeah.
I'm still enjoying. I enjoy my job.
Yeah, and that's great. And I encourage you to stay there as long as you enjoy it.
Yeah.
You've I'm not gonna say I was kind of shocked. I saw one day on Facebook a while back, Reuben had made a post and said, "I'll be delivering the sermon at the Webb Methodist Church on Sunday." I'm like, really? Not that I was shocked that you would do that, but it was just like, Reuben's in the ministry. So tell us a little bit about that evolution.
I started at church here. I was in church for a while, and I was living in the Woodlands at the end of the cul-de-sac, and my son Brody was 5-6 years old, maybe, just guessing. And about 2 doors down from us around the cul-de-sac, so it was really like right there, there was a family that lived there that had 2 kids just younger than Brody. So it was really like when we were growing up playing in the street and all, and it was cul-de-sacs and no car traffic was coming through. And their dad walked out one day and we were talking, and he said, "Hey, if you're not churched," he said, "we go to Wiregrass, we'd love to see you there." No push, no, you really need to go and you really need to, just kind of left it at that. And I was like, okay. About 3 weeks later, I was saying, I really want to get back in church. And I was looking at Wiregrass and a couple others, and I went to Wiregrass, and it's funny because I was walking across the parking lot. I'm one of those people, I do not like awkward situations. I do not like if we go out for my birthday, if the waitresses come up and start singing, I'm getting up and leaving right then. I can't, family sings at the house, that's for them, that's for the kids, grandkids, whatever. I'll tolerate it there, just to keep everybody happy. But, so I was like, okay, here comes this guy across the parking lot, and, welcome to Wiregrass, and who are you? And we walked by, he kept going, and I was kind of like, Well, that was rude.
Even though you didn't want him to.
Yeah, I didn't want it. But I was kind of
man,
expecting
that's
it,
rude. You're
you
not
know,
supposed to do that.
But, nobody did. Nobody approached. And I was like, I kind of like this, and walked down the hallway and kind of, they got coffee here, and fixed me a cup of coffee. And
That's so
went on
funny.
in
That's the
sanctuary.
exact opposite of what you usually hear. People are like, man, they just welcomed me, and I just felt great.
I felt,
Like, no, I really like that they all kept to themselves and just let me kind of explore. Kind of like a cat. It's like, just let them kind of figure it out.
They'll, we'll meet eventually. So, I fixed my coffee, and I'll never forget. I went in the sanctuary, and I was standing there looking around, like, man, this place is big. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got coffee in here, so I was about to stick it under my chair, and then I looked around, like, hey, everybody else got their coffee too. Okay. And so started going through. This was several years ago. And listened to Andy Stanley, and this was before he kind of went the direction he did. And I'll tell you, the thing I liked about Andy was he would take a word, a very common word in a verse, and pull that word out and go on what this word meant in Hebrew. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I put a new viewpoint on. And one of the times, and this one really stuck out, was a new commandment I give unto you, love each other. And he goes on, he takes the word new. Well, we all know what new means. Well, in Hebrew, it does have that same meaning, something different and unknown and all. Most unique or most important. And so now plug that in. Mm-hmm. And it's like most important command I give. And it's like, oh, wow. Mm-hmm. So that stuff. But I was really sitting in there, and that's when it hit me. I mean, I broke down and all and realized I was being rescued. I was not the one rescuing anymore. Wow. I was being rescued. So I talked to one of the pastors there, and at the time everybody thought, well, there isn't a pastor at that church. It's all about, and I was like, you're right. There's not a pastor. There's 5. They're there. Yeah, it's not just the video and all. And talked to Brett Hemphill and said, hey, I want to get baptized as a conscious decision, not I'm a baby getting Christian. I want to do as a. So you go in, you video your story, and we did that. And said, who do you want to baptize you? And so I thought about a couple of people. I said, man, you'd be great. I said, or Clint, Aslan. Clint was the facilities manager for that church. He did all the construction, reconstruction, background, stages.
Is that Clint? What's his last name?
Aslan.
Aslan?
Okay. Yeah. He's got a twin brother that works at Lowe's, and they are identical. I mean, really? Yeah. Most of the time I can pick something out in
What's
twins.
What's his brother's name?
Remember right now, and I should.
No, that's okay.
Cut that part.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Edit that part. I'm going to feel bad if he ever sees this. But so what was funny is, if you've ever been in Wiregrass, their baptism pool is elevated. It's up in like the top left corner. Kind of juts out of a wall. Mm-hmm. And Clint's normally, because of his job, if somebody's getting baptized that day, he's the one that fills the pool, makes sure the heater's on, there's warm water going in. So Clint's doing this, and he's nervous because he's going to be baptized. He's never baptized anyone before. So, he's a little nervous. Well, if somebody happened to mention something about the pool getting full, and Clint's eyes get about this big, he almost overfills it down onto the congregation.
My gosh.
Yeah, so he runs up, he gets to stop, and is like, we were very careful getting in that we didn't splash over the side or anything. But
you're in the splash zone. They should have a sign.
So, they showed my story up on the video, and Clint baptized me. I was told later, they said, by a young lady that goes to church there, she said, Reuben, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. I was like, well, I'm glad it wasn't just me then. So thank you. But so I really enjoyed my time there. Went through some personal strife, and I'm one of those, and this is one of my major faults, but I'll be the first to admit it. I withdraw when I have a problem or an issue, and it may resort back to that rescue swimmer thing that you're on your own and you save yourself. And I was going through a lot of personal issues at the time, so I kind of pulled back. And Amy and I started seeing each other, and she got me. She grew up at Webb Methodist, and so I started going with her down there, and kind of like moving from New Orleans to Dothan. It was going from Wiregrass to Webb Methodist. I was like, culture shock. 1, 2, 3, 23 of us here today. There's over 200 volunteers over here.
Yeah.
Love the church. I can't say enough about Joe White, the pastor there. I love the way he preaches, his technique. He'll get up and say, okay, let's turn to 1 Samuel and chapter 17. And, he'll go over, and then once we read it all together, he'll say, okay, 3 points today. And we kid him because sometimes he forgets to tell you. He'll start with point 1, but he'll go into point 2 without telling you this is point 2.
So we like point.
But he preaches almost in a Bible study format, and so I really feel like by the time I walked out, I've learned something today.
You know what the Bible says.
And so anyway, we had started there, and somebody after church, you want to join the choir? I said, you don't want me to join your choir. I promise you, so I can't carry a tune in a bucket. I know it says make a joyful noise, and that's about the extent of mine. It's a joyful noise, and that's
It's noise.
So I said I can talk, but I can't sing. And I said I've been behind the pulpit, and once back years ago, and basically it was in a youth group. The youth group led the service that day, and me and a couple of buddies of mine delivered the sermon. And so Joe said, okay. Well, Joe's got a son that goes to Mississippi State, and so he likes to go over and visit every once in a while. And so Joe was going to go, and he called me plenty ahead of time, so I had everything prepared. And then Joe called. He said, been a little change. I said, okay. He said, still want you to preach, but I'm going to be there. And I was like, well, that's not any pressure
At all.
Yeah,
right.
But it went well. I kind of did it on my unofficial title was, I don't know if you've seen the movie Princess Bride, but it was that verse. It doesn't mean what I think you think it means, and so we went into, the famous Philippians, I can do all things through Christ who strengthened me. I said, let's go back a little bit. Where's Paul at when he wrote this? He's under arrest, his house arrest. He's basically got an ankle monitor, and everybody kind of looked at me. I said, he's chained to a Roman guard. And I said, when I picture chained to somebody, I'm thinking ankle to ankle. So yeah, he's under house arrest with an ankle monitor on. I said, but he's about to go up in front of somebody who's certifiably crazy. And it's either you're good to go or you're dead. I said, I don't think he meant, oh yeah, I can walk out of here now, even though he had done it before. That was not his implication. It was, I can endure all things. I said, let's go back and so we went through that, and it went pretty good. And Joe called me one day, and he was sick, and he said, asked me. I said, yeah. I said, I've got a couple of things prepared. I said, I can go. So I got to go up again and give the sermon, and he called me the next week. He said, we've got 2 issues. I said, okay. He said, I'm still sick. He said, I feel like I could get up and preach, but Marg, which is his wife, thinks I'll start coughing and I'll scare all these people to death. He said, because I'm still having these really, really bad coughing spells. He said, plus I've fallen and I've got a black eye that covers about half my face.
Oh, goodness.
And I said, okay. I said, yeah. I said, I got you. I got to go. And I'm one of those, people are like, hey, can you? Yeah. And they walk off like, how are we going to get this done?
Right.
It was Christmas service. So I was like, well, that's
no pressure there either.
No pressure there
Absolutely.
either. But,
No, another topic. That's right.
yeah, exactly. So I approached it a little bit different and went with the Gospel of Luke. But I did chapter 1, verse 1. And I'm one who looks at the Bible. First of all, yes, it is the ordained Word of God. It's His breath He's breathed into it. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it is not a book. It is a canon of books. It is a collection of books by different and letters by different writers. To the point, this is documented history. Is what it is. Yeah. So now we go back and look at Luke, and Luke opens up his gospel by saying, "This is who I am. Mm-hmm. This is what I've done. This is where I've been, and this is who I've interviewed one-on-one." Mm-hmm. So I can confirm all of this to you, Theophilus, which I know this guy was important and he was Roman, but I still want to know more about who this guy is. Can't find, that's like, when you get to heaven, what are you? I'm going to find out who Theophilus is a little bit more. But, I went into and I could come up to you off the street and say, yeah, I used to jump out of helicopters and I fight fire and all that. And you can walk away and go, man, that guy's crazy. But if you know who it is presenting to you and you know their background, you know their history, and then they tell you things, it becomes more, I don't want to say more believable, but yeah, more believable.
You're not crazy.
You're not crazy.
You're not just making this up.
You're studying documented history. So I kind of approached it like that, and then went into the Christmas story, a little bit different, and try to crack a little humor to keep people awake, So I was like, Joseph forgot to make reservations. So when he walked back out and told Mary,
let this
and
be a lesson
you know what Mary said? You know what Mary said? Mary looked at him and Joseph said, I'm sorry. It's fine. It is fine. And when your wife tells you
it ain't
fine.
It ain't fine.
But that's what Mary hit him back with. I'm pretty sure was, it's fine. I'm about to deliver a child.
We're going
in this stable over here with all the cow manure, everything else, is so. But it's been fun to get up there. It's been enjoyable, and I always learn when I get up there. And there's stuff that even after researching it and getting everything written out and getting up there and in the middle of delivering, I'm like, I didn't look at it like that. Yeah. Before, even when I was reading and researching, while I'm standing up here, so
I'm literally saying this, and
I'm saying
it's
this,
dawning on me as I'm saying this.
It's like this something like this. That's it exactly. That's it exactly.
Well, and teachers usually, like when you learn the most teaching something, not always.
Oh, you do.
Listening to somebody teach, So yeah, it's definitely that.
You do. I'm working on something now that, and it's in Matthew's gospel and some of the others, but it's while Christ was on the cross. And when he said, Eli, Eli, God, why have you forsaken me? It was like, and this is why I will probably never, ever be able to read the whole Bible all the way through. Because I go back to that Andy Stanley thing about taking that one word and dissecting, and then I take, and it's like that ADHD thing, it's like I go down this trail and what did this one verse mean and start researching and back and forth. And it's like, okay, 4 hours later and I've got 3 verses out of this one chapter covered.
Yeah, right.
But, you get in and, okay, is he saying that God, his father forsaked him and put him, I know he's in pain and just incredible pain,
so
the worst. And then, and it's like, wait a minute. What's it say back over here in Psalms 22, where it starts off, why have you forsaken me? Right. And it gets into, and I get to the point where then it talks about, but I am but a worm. And I'm going back and say, you don't say anything about me. Then find out, okay, the Hebrew word he used for worm here is not the Hebrew word for worm, it's the Hebrew word for crimson worm, which is the red worm, which they crushed to make the robe, to dye the robes and all when it was a royal color. Yeah. And you start getting into what's this comparison? And, this worm protects its children and feeds its newborn its blood until it dies. And then it dies white. And it's like, okay, I've been here 4 hours and
some deep theology.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
You start doing this deep dive and it's like, I was really just wanting to study this book and get an idea of what Paul meant here, or what
which
Matthew
we could talk about
here.
that. I mean, the forsake, Jesus saying
we could be
forever,
here all day.
for sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely it goes deep. For sure.
Do you think that because I look back at my and early on we talked about this, I'd been saved early on, but I fell away and did a lot of stuff that I'm not proud of. But I always felt like God was with me. And now I can see that, at this point in my life. I mean, I think he had his hand on me the whole time. You think that might be the case with you?
Oh, most certainly. Most
to
definitely.
kind of prepare you for where you are now?
Most definitely.
So looking back on that?
I most definitely feel that.
Yeah.
I may have stepped away from him, but he never stepped away from me.
Yeah.
I mean, he was there.
There's no explanation for a lot of that. I mean, like with you in that fire.
No.
But God. He kept you.
If we have time, I'll tell you one more story like similar.
We are running a little bit long on time, but real quick.
All right. So back when I was on the Point Lobos on a cutter, we got called to a fishing vessel that was sinking way out in the Gulf, way out. Point Lobos responding to calls 30 miles plus from land. And all the small boats, the 41s, did insides. Anyway, we get out there to it, and the whole stern, the back end of the boat's underwater. And so we launch our small boat, put a guy in it, put some pumps. He takes it over. They're trying to pump it, but like I said, the stern's now underwater, so it's like just pumping the whole Gulf. So we take the boat in tow and start towing it against the seas. And it's December, January. It's chilly out, even there. So I went ahead and put on one of what we call the Gumby suits, and all the survival suit. And with the back end of the boat down, the bow, the pointy end of the boat is pointed up, and there's a post dead center right in front of the cabin that sticks up that we had tied off to. We had thrown the loop over, and we're towing it. Well, the pointy end of the boat's rubbing on the tow line. It's chafing it.
Yeah.
So we carry gear just for that called chafing gear, and basically all it is fire hose that's split open. And you wrap the fire hose around it, and then you take small stuff string and tie off to it, so the boat's rubbing against that fire hose now,
Right.
to the rope. So I had volunteered. I said, hey, I'll go put the chafing gear on. Okay, so they dropped me off, and I kind of jump over in the back of the boat in the water and shimmy up by the cabin, and it's pretty narrow walking by. And get up there, and now there's really nothing to hold on to, so I'm laying down. I crawl up, and I get past the post, and I put the chafing gear around it, and I'm trying to wrap the small stuff, the string around to tie it. And one of the times the boat had gone down, I got my hands underneath, and it came down on my hand. I was like, oh, that's not real comfortable. Caught another wave, went off, so, I got my hand out, and I was like, okay, we're going to play this smarter. And I tied it off, and some of the time I'm laying on top of this tow line, and tow line's, it's a really thick rope, and they'd showed us the videos, in boot camp and all of it. One of them snapping, and they got the mannequins there, and it rips them apart and all. So I get everything tied off, and I'm like, well, okay, now how am I going to get back? Because the boat's sitting at an angle, and there's nothing really to hold on to, and I'm not exactly a ballerina by any stretch. So I rolled back till I hit the front of the cabin, and I landed on my back. So now I'm like, well, I'm kind of in this cockroach position and just getting ready to find a way to flip myself over. And I heard this, it sounded like a 12-gauge shotgun going off. Boom! The first thing that went through my mind was that tow line just parted. And I laid there and I was like, okay, I can feel my feet. I can feel my legs. I said, or maybe that's that phantom pain thing. So I'm looking down. I said, okay, I got them. And I looked up, and by this time, the guys on the back of our cutter are all yelling, are you okay? Are you okay? Reuben, are you okay? I looked, and I said, yeah, I'm fine. I looked, and what had happened was that Samson post had come up and out and went forward. Probably about less than 30 seconds before that post came out, I was laying on top of that tow line.
Yeah.
Oh.
It would have literally ripped me in two sections. From groin to head, it would have ripped me in 2 sections.
God had
and I
his
rolled
hand on
back.
that.
When I made it back on the cutter, we had this big old engineering chief, Chief McGuire, and everything that the name McGuire, big Irish and thick Coke bottle glasses and all. I'll never. The guy was awesome, but I just looked over at him. He was Catholic, and I just looked over at him. I said, Chief. He said, yeah, Reuben. I said, if we're in port next Sunday, I said, you can bet your butt my butt will be in a pew. He said, yeah, I think it needs to be. I said, there was only one thing that saved me. He said, yeah, God had his hand on that post till you rolled off of it.
There's no
he
doubt.
He said a couple of guys that were not paying attention at first didn't realize I had moved and thought that it had already got me. So,
That gives me
yeah,
chills.
that was one that, you know, there's no doubt in my mind God had his hand on that.
Wow.
Just reinforces what I said. I mean, that your whole career, you know, he was there with you. You might have not have been with him, but he was with you. And I think that, you know, we go through all those things to prepare us for where he wants us to be.
Definitely so. Definitely so.
I mean, if you'd asked either one of, you know, him or me, what, 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
If we'd be sitting here doing a podcast, you know, talking about this stuff, I mean, what we'd probably say, nah, I don't know.
Talking
15 or
about your
20 years
faith.
ago, I wouldn't know what a podcast
podcast
was.
was.
Yeah, right. That didn't exist back then.
But yeah, it's and I've really enjoyed it here today, gentlemen. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Outstanding story.
Yeah, we're glad to give you a platform. That's what we like to do here. Really, is to give people a platform to talk about their faith, talk about leadership, talk about just whatever is pertinent to really being a man and stepping up and being a leader. Whether it's at home, whether it's in your church, whether it's in the community, or whether it's at work. You know, in your vocation and purpose. And purpose in life. I mean, no doubt in your mind that your purpose in life was to be a rescue swimmer, to be a firefighter, to be a paramedic, probably to be a minister.
You know, I've got a cousin that's a Baptist minister in Louisiana. We hadn't seen each other for years, but
Yeah.
you know, I used to think back even when I was living in New Orleans and they were living up farther north in Louisiana. I was like, I'll save the bodies, you save the souls.
Yeah.
You know, but now I look back and it's like, okay,
can do
the few that I have saved, did I give them a second chance to find
Yeah.
Christ? You know, that would be the ultimate to me that I have. But you know, God's put some miraculous people in my life. My son Brody, my wife Amy. I couldn't have done so much that I've accomplished lately without her backing me up.
Yeah.
She's been there. She's been my back on ultra running.
Yeah.
And all of my coach, my team, just there to support. And whoever ever get to make it back, I've got some stories on that.
We'll definitely have you back on. We've got a whole list of people we want to bring back on.
yeah.
You're going to be one of them because I love the stories that you had. But I do think that we probably exhausted this day today, don't you think?
Probably so.
Outstanding story, great story. Appreciate you being here. Like I said,
enjoyed
glad
it.
to have you back.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Everybody listening to us, we always like to say this. I always like to let Thomas do this because he knows all the different platforms that we're on. Please continue to follow us. We enjoy everything that we're doing here. I was thinking about this a little while ago. You know, we started this with, we want to inspire first responders, law enforcement, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, well, no, it's bigger. We want to inspire men. I think we have something for everybody. So we love doing this. God put this on our heart to do this. But we need your support. You know, follow us on these different platforms. Give us those likes. Subscribe. You know, we can't keep doing this unless we have people like you that listen. So
we're adding resources to our website. So if you, and right now they're free. So if you need anything as far as, or just want to go to our website, theshepherdstation.com, and you can find some free resources. We have Dr. Olivia Johnson's ebook on there right now, and looking to probably add some more things coming in the future. There's a lot of plans that we have, and so just keep an eye out for all that as well, because we have some big plans in the making for sure.
absolutely. And tune in today because her show it aired
It was
today.
released this morning.
It was
this morning.
outstanding interview with her. Very, very.
It really is. And from a third party, I've gotten to listen to right at first half of it.
Yeah, it gives you a whole
This
different
morning,
aspect.
And
of
oh
how
my
to look at
gosh,
that.
definitely.
So that's really good. But I think we're going to wrap it up today. Andy, you got anything?
No, thanks again.
Thank
this
you.
is we appreciate the people that are listening, and the audience seems to be growing. Of course, like we've always said, if we do 1,000 episodes and we only reach one person, then we've done what God wanted us to do with this podcast. But we enjoy this. I look forward to every single Tuesday coming in, and either whether we've got a guest here or we're just tossing around a
Our
certain
mindless
topic, either
banter.
one. Yeah. So we really enjoy it, and just thank God for for giving us this platform, giving Eric the inspiration, and I appreciate the invite to
This is
be
all God.
be a participant.
Same.
All God. Reuben, would you mind closing us out? I'm going to put you on the spot. Would you close us out with prayer?
I think we can handle that. Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us here today. And Lord, and thank you for putting all of these awesome gentlemen in my life and help inspire me, Lord. And I hope my story helps to inspire others, Lord. Please watch over all of us, watch over our families, and watch over our friends, Lord. Just guide us with your protecting hand, and just let us continue to praise and worship you and put you first in everything that we do. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.